This is episode 22 of Standing Out. Standing Out is a remarkable interview-style podcast with the intention to highlight women and men making outstanding contributions in their field. This podcast is generously sponsored by Think Global. Think Global is a business advisory firm working with women entrepreneurs around the globe to scale their businesses to the next level. Today, I'd like to welcome Anie Akpe. Anie is founder of Innov8tiv magazine and founder of IBOM LLC. She's a business professional and entrepreneur with more than 15 years experience in the baking industry, currently managing a more than $575 million portfolio. As founder of IBOM, Anie aids small businesses around the world, particularly those owned by African entrepreneurs, guiding business development and strategy and leading sound results in the completion of their business goals. Anie, I'd like to welcome you today. Thanks for being here.
Hi everyone.
Hi, yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
I know, I love doing this interview series. I always wish it was live in front of the audience so we could see them as we're doing it together, but yeah, we have to go virtual and know that they'll be there to listen.
We love virtual.
Well, okay, so one of the things I didn't get to in your bio is that you're a native of Nigeria, and you have really found your sweet spot in meshing your global experience and culture with the skills that you also have gained from corporate America. I would love to know a little bit more about the backstory and how your journey started as an entrepreneur.
Okay. Yes, it's a great privilege for me to mesh my cultural background with my corporate background and be able to see the benefits that, happens from being able to combine those two things that I love.
Yeah.
The way that I got into entrepreneurship was based on the fact that, as we all know, corporate America, you get to a point where you're just like, I have to hustle, I have to do this, I have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make those goals, and you do. And then you get to a point also within corporate America where you start to feel like I'm missing something. There's things that I need to accomplish, and I'm just not there yet. So as I stopped doing the corporate America 9-to-5, all the corporate America networking, I started to go to my cultural networking events. So like the African events, they'd have like networking. They'd ask me, what do you do? And I'd say, well, I'm VP of mortgage, at a credit union. And then they'll say, well, okay, good. Can you help me with this business, this, and this? Or can you help me with this, and this business?
Oh, that's interesting.
Exactly. No matter where I went to, they just translated into, you're in banking, you can help me answer this question. Mm-hmm. And generally, people in banking can answer those questions because at some point or another, it just crosses no matter what you do.
Right.
So, but because I started to get those questions a lot and I was already yearning to do something more and I didn't know exactly what it was, I said, you know what? How about if I give back to my community? That might be a really that might be a really good idea.
Right.
Right.
Light bulb, hello.
Exactly. Serious light bulb going on.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So
did Innov8tiv magazine and IBOM start as sort of a side project where you were giving back? Is that okay?
Yes. You mentioned that it's definitely not a straight road that you go. You find these curves as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for me, the first straight road that I took was that I knew I wanted to do something that would give back to the community, but also be able to educate the community. And within what I do now, which is my full-time job, I have the privilege of being project manager on several technology applications that we bring in. Okay. And at the same time, also being able to understand business because my parents owned the business. I had my own business in Atlanta before I moved to New York City.
Okay.
So I understood the full things that they were asking me. So I said, you know what? I have lots of connections. Why don't I just host events that this way they can get these questions answered and feel a lot more complete instead of I give them the answer and that's the end of it. There is no follow-up. And there could actually be people from the events that could do a follow-up with them. So
that's really interesting that you had connections to start with, because one of the things I think, and it's part of this journey of, we always want there to be some linear path, like boom, 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 here's my steps, it's laid out, we're done. But there are very few circumstances of where I see that happening. And when I'm actually talking to people and hearing their story, it's much more nonlinear. And so one of the things that a mentor had told me early on was build a network before you need it. And I think it's interesting that you came into this spot and you're saying, hey, I have all these connections. Let's do something with it.
Right.
And did that feel like in that moment, did that feel like that was like those connections were of value, or was it just kind of like, well, I don't know, we'll kind of start and see what happens?
Well, for me, it's funny. I'm going to reference corporate America again.
Yeah.
When you go to corporate America networking events, you take for granted that you know a lot of people.
Right.
So on the executive level, you just meet so many people that it never occurs to you that, hey, I may need to do something with these people. And then until you start to say, oh, how can I give back? And then you start to think of, how can I do this to where, number one, it's not a conflict for my 9 to 5.
Right.
However, it still works because it's totally different. So yes, I had a network going into it that was like eager, to help, to assist, and, to want to be panel speakers. What I didn't have a network of was a lot of technology people outside of fintech, because fintech is where I'm at.
Right.
But I didn't have that network outside of fintech. So I had to build up. But it didn't matter because someone I knew always knew someone, or this person always knew someone.
Totally.
Yeah.
So one of our clients, we were just, we were doing a strategy session with them recently, and I can't remember exactly how it came up, but it's one of our clients. We absolutely love working with them. They love us. And he was joking. He's like, well, and he's in corporate America. And he said, well, most people only stay in their current corporate job for 2 to 4 years, and then they move on to a new job. And when he said that, at first I'm like, well, that would be such a bummer to not be able to work with you anymore. But then what I realized was also in that statement of, yes, you're going to move on, but we have such a strong relationship that we get to move on with you. So I think it's really interesting to be keeping those connections and, really valuing them and
Right.
thinking about them.
Right. In my network, I still know people from like 12 to 15, 20 years ago. I don't work with them. I've worked with them at some point or another. And then now they're like, oh, you're doing this now. Let me know if you need anything. Because if you even build relationships, which is like, I only need to see you once every 3 months. We're not friends like that. We're business associates, and we may need each other ultimately. So me meeting with you once a quarter, it's not harmful to me. It's not harmful to you. I maintain a relationship, and you never know what you're going to need because that's just how it works. Right. So that part of it was essentially easier for me because I already knew a lot of people, and a lot of people I know a lot of people. Right. So, and it made my transition into what I was doing fairly simple. So, and then from like having those events, I realized that, you know what, I'm having a hard time reaching out to the tech community, especially like Blacks in tech, because what happens, of course, with technology is everybody is going to everyone else's event. There is no event that says, hey, these are minorities, go reach out to them. Right. We're embedded in each other's events. So I said, you know what, because I'm having a little bit of a hard time getting more and more people, then the final conclusion for me was just to go ahead and say, I'm going to do something to where, I can get their attention, which is how the blog came about. So with Innov8tiv, it allowed me to say, wow, I know this person, and a lot of people don't know this person. So let me put it out there. So, because we're great at PR. Yes. Yeah. So we would do the interviews. We said, it's not just minorities in tech, because that's not, for me, a realistic picture in a sense of what the tech world encompasses. Mm-hmm. So if we do find, a minority, then we should highlight that because, hey, you're already embedded in a community that is a melting pot anyway. Right. So to showcase you and say, hey, if you're looking and this is what your interests are, this person is doing this or that person's doing that. So it let us stick to the technology format because the events were based on using technology to create efficiency for your small businesses,
Mm-hmm.
different formats within that, then the blog made it 10 times easier to just stick to that and say,
Right.
you know what, hey, did you know about this? Or this person created this. Whatever the case is, you
Yeah.
just did a melting pot.
That's what I love about technology. And I guess this, more specifically, the social media space now is it's so, I just feel like we have knocked down so many doors by having social media. You know, like you can find whatever you are interested in. And even if you don't know you're interested in it, it's likely to pop up in your newsfeed, and now you know. And I think that is so incredible.
Yeah. And I find people that way. People find me that way. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
I saw you at this and this event. Didn't get a chance to talk to you. But then they stumble into my profile, you know,
Exactly.
and then from there, you know, a bond is made. So I
Right.
love technology for that, because it really allows you to, it's almost free marketing to a certain extent based on a platform you use.
Absolutely. So are you noticing in what you're doing, are you noticing the landscape change at all with more minorities running tech companies? Or do you feel like are you seeing sort of an imbalance still?
I think that there will always be an imbalance. I think that that landscape is still, no matter what, it's a combination of white men, Indians, Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
So the landscape is full of that. And when you walk into any tech company, you're only going to see, you know, maybe two women and, you know,
Right.
any other people of any color, you know, you're only going to see but so many. I think because the conversation is happening now, people, of course, are becoming more aware, you know. However, at
Mhm.
the same time, people are like, okay, that's great, but how do our HR people reach out to these folks? And
Right.
that's the thing about being an HR person. You do have to search, you know, to make sure. But at the same time, when you have people like myself that can put that information out there of what you're looking for, it should
Right.
make your job easier. So
Right.
in essence, do I feel like it's changing? No, I believe the conversation is forefront right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the
So
conversation is most definitely forefront. And I do love seeing some of the stats we're seeing that just really support the results that minorities in leadership roles are gaining, just from the standpoint of continuing that conversation and, you know, giving us a lens to focus on things a little bit differently, you know.
right, right, and that's what makes it important, because no matter what, yes, we find out that women investors don't get as much money as men, you know. So we found out that some investors just won't touch you unless you're within a network.
Right.
It's like when you start to pull people's portfolios of what they're doing, then you could see the reality. And some people are comfortable showing it, and most are not.
Right.
So,
Right.
but
Right.
so, but so long as that conversation's out there, you know, for those that are truly doing it, it's like a great topic, because it's like you get to showcase what you're doing. For those
Mm-hmm.
that are not, they're kind of like, won't
Like,
this conversation just
but
die already?
yeah. That's funny. Well, what is your favorite part about being an entrepreneur? Like, what keeps you going and excited?
I think it's the what is it called? That instant gratification.
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes some work that you do and people that you work with, you can immediately see the instant gratification of what was successful. So, and that makes you feel like, so that's my missing purpose, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
So,
think that's true in the entrepreneurial field. We all move so darn fast these days. And I know I also have more of a corporate background too. And I know, you know, it's funny when you give you can give the same project to an entrepreneur and the same project to a corporation, and the speed at which it goes through the entrepreneurial process is, I mean, it's lightning
right.
compared to on the corporate side, just because there are generally less approval processes and some fewer hoops to jump through, so to speak. And so I feel like we move so fast, so I can totally understand that instant gratification. Like, you have the plan, here it is, now here's what was manifested from that.
Exactly. And I think with corporations, a lot of the time is so caught up in legalities issues.
Right.
So that contract review could take anywhere from like 2 to 6 months. You're not going through. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But you have a small business owner and they're only dealing with one attorney, and they know what they're willing to live with. So it goes through a lot quicker, so you can get something quicker accomplished.
Right.
So the outcome of what you're seeing, it's immediate generally. And for me, I mean immediate. It could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 months. You know,
Right.
other projects for us on our end, if I'm in corporate, it could take me 6 months to a year to get that thing accomplished.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, I think that's true. What is in the within the groups that you're working with, what is sort of one very common issue that you're handling, and what's some advice or insight into that one common issue?
The common issue is always, well, it's actually two. It's actually funding and resources.
Okay.
Right now, I'm working with an organization that I just actually became a board member of. It's called Tech for Her Africa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and what they're doing, their focus is helping African women, you know, just to make sure that they're aware of all the latest tools and programming and design that they could possibly need in order to create a business, or if they need it, maybe just to acquire a job.
Oh,
So that's, yeah, the career aspect of that. And generally when most companies approach me, it's usually because they need either access to information, which is resources for me, or also funding. You know, how can we get people to notice our project? How can we get funding? What can we do? Who should we talk to?
Right.
You know, who's offering something? And 9 times out of 10, you know, there are organizations that support those organizations that are doing things like that, but you might have just missed the deadline. So now we have to talk about fundraising.
Right.
You know?
And
So
I feel like that is always the way it goes. You find something and you're like, oh, the deadline was last week. I didn't even know, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. You didn't know. So now you're like, I'm like, do a fundraiser. The next thing is, you know, if, you know, it's good for us to have people that we could reach out to, but at the end of the day, you need to figure out a way to do a fundraising that's not going to be a big impact to you. So
Right.
that's how I usually approach those. And it takes, you know, that takes a little bit of a longer time, in essence of getting other people to just donate the space or donate the time or get the right people in order to make that fundraiser truly worth it or of value.
Right.
For people to participate. But when that happens, it's like, no matter what, you started off with, let's just say 1,000, and now you're like at 8,000. That's a lot more better than where you started. Next year, you position it and you ask for a different amount or set your goals differently.
Right.
But those things I like to work with them on, because it's just a matter of understanding what you need to do and structuring it, because U.S. corporate America has taught you, if anything else, you better be organized and you better be structured. Otherwise, we're not paying attention to you.
Ah, that's interesting. And I know from just speaking with a lot of particularly women who have been in accelerator programs, the amount of structure and organization that they have coming out is really incredible. And you can hear it just in, I don't want to say like when they're pitching the business, but I guess just in regular old conversations that you have with these women, they're very succinct and their messaging is clear and their plan is so very laid out. And I think there's so much value in that. And I think it's easier to buy in when you see someone has a plan and a vision and things are aligned, because it for people looking to invest and just other people who are interested, it helps to paint that picture. Like we see what it is, we see where it's going.
Right. And you can't blame investors for not wanting their time wasted. Obviously, for them, they've already computed time is money.
Right.
So my time is money. So me spending an hour with you to get out of your head what idea, concept, or whatever it is you're trying to describe,
Right.
you know, in detail is a waste of my time. You need to have it ready. It needs to be structured. You need to know what direction, so that even if I gave you a pitch format and you practice it, doesn't matter. I'm jumping around to ask you questions to make sure that you're completely understanding and comfortable with whatever product you're trying to sell. So,
Right.
And that's the type of structure that you need, because people don't have that. People generally, I could say that most people in corporate America, if you're any type of manager and up position, you automatically get that. because you have to do recommendations, you have to do memos, you have to do all
Right.
of those things on a regular basis. And you're not just going to walk in there and get your boss to just sign off on something. So, so exactly. So every day you're making a pitch.
That is such interesting framing. Every day you're making a pitch. Like I think we all get so afraid of that pitch that we forget we do that every day. Like that's just a part of business.
It's part of your language. You're doing it every day. You may not think of it as anything because that may not be the thing that makes you nervous. However, you're still doing it.
Right.
And so now to take that experience and translate it to other people who've never had that experience, who've never done that. They can speak well, but they've never had to make sure that the words that they use impacted their presentation.
Right. that it impacts the logical side of the brain and the emotional side. And
exactly.
Well, that's great insight. So as we wrap up, I would love, the last question I have for you is, what sort of trend or hot topic is on your radar that you think we'll all be talking about in a year from now?
I still believe that I'm still going to go global with this one. We're going to talk more about African women in technology. We have a lot of organizations that are now coming over. There were some there already, and I have a Twitter chat on that, but nevertheless, there's more people engaging and finding out what's happening within Africa. So I think that what you're going to see is a lot more articles on what's being created or what has already been out there for a little while. So right now there really isn't that buzz. There's no conversation unless someone does a special report. But I think a year from now, you're going to see a lot more of those things happening and a lot more investing. Don't get me wrong. A lot of investment is happening in Africa. That's a buzz. So now the next buzz has to be what are African women doing in technology? That's a different type of buzz.
Right. Well, I can't wait to hear all of that and see that buzz. So I'm sure you're spot on with that. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, of course. You're welcome.